The views expressed by the speakers of CamaPlan podcast are those of the speakers only and may not reflect those of Cama, its members, or employees. Cama does not guarantee the accuracy of information provided by these speakers. Professional advisors should be consulted before implementing any options presented. Cama absolutely does not endorse or recommend any individual or organization, including the speakers. Cama, its members, and employees do not accept liability for losses and or damages arising from errors or omissions within, reliance upon, or any use of the information provided by the speakers. Individuals are strongly encouraged by Cama to conduct their own due diligence before making any investment choices. Cama does not act as, nor offer the services of, an investment advisor, CPA, realtor, or attorney. If tax, legal, accounting, investment, or other similar expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional should be sought. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Road to Financial Freedom, a podcast that allows experts to share their stories and secrets to unlocking their financial independence. This podcast is brought to you by CamaPlan, a self-directed IRA administrator located in Ambler, Pennsylvania, that's focused on educating investors with different ways to grow their retirement savings faster through alternative investments. And of course, we are continuing to record our podcast remotely. I'm Jess Jones, CamaPlan team member and your podcast host. Our guest this week is the co-founder and fund manager of MWM Fund and co-founder of PaperStack, and has been an active investor for over 10 years. He is an expert in conducting transactions with investment strategies across the real estate sector, namely in discounted acquisitions and distressed assets. As a key player for both MWM Fund and PaperStack, he has worked with large A-list institutions, participated in the purchases of over 400 single-family homes. Since 2014, it has been his goal to actively work on finding new ways for note investors to purchase and sell mortgage notes, and to bring this opportunity to a wider audience by focusing on growing and expanding the market. So with all that being said, please welcome Rick Allen to The Road to Financial Freedom. Hello, Rick. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate that kind introduction.
Absolutely. Well, your bio speaks for itself. I'm really excited to get to hear about your journey, how you've gotten to this place, and how you've developed this goal that you're now able to share with investors and wider audiences. So start from the very beginning. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your background, where you were born, grew up, went to school. What did you study? All that. I find this answer is always very interesting because there are all these random things that people did in their past that have somehow catapulted them to their present.
Sure, absolutely. Let me start with, I am a husband, a father of three. So my beautiful wife, Brandy, has been really supportive along the way. And I've got three kids who are 11, 8, and 6. So I want to get that out of there because sometimes I get going and I'll forget. But no, that they're very much a part of my life. But I'm a Midwest boy. I was born in Columbus, Ohio, lived there till I was 8 or 9, and then moved down to Florida. We're in Orlando, and I've lived here, I guess now most of my life. I'm 41, and so I've lived within, minus part I went to college right around Orlando or the general vicinity for, the past 30 plus years. So I would say, as much as I'm a Midwest boy at heart, I'm definitely not natural Floridian, but I consider myself a Floridian.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so, I grew up, I don't know, it's funny. From where I am now, I do a lot of math, but growing up, I hated math. I just hated it. I was like, this is more. I just hated it. I was like, I don't like math. The big calculus and stuff like that just scared the hell out of me. And I ended up, going away. I went to school at UF, University of Florida. I went in there and I started out as a pre-med major. I was like, I'm gonna go and be pre-med, and the hate of math and then chemistry kind of caught up with me.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, that's not gonna be it. And so I actually ended up in advertising at University of Florida, finished up my degree. I moved back to Orlando and graduated from UCF graduated from there. And when I got out of college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I had a job bartending. I'd bartended through college, and it's crazy because growing up, I was really a shy kid. I just didn't want to go talk to people. It just wasn't my thing. I wasn't comfortable just being out of my shell. When I started bartending, it was probably one of the best, my dad says it all the time, one of the best life experiences I could have, because you just interact with people on a daily basis, and you're part social chemist and part like therapist.
Yes, yeah.
And so you kind of just learn to read people, talk to people. And while I was bartending, there was this group of people that came in, and they were always like really nicely dressed, had nice watches on, and it'd be 2:00 in the afternoon, they're having lunch, having a beer or something like that, and they're like, yeah, we're done for the day. I'm like, well, what do you guys do? They're like, well, we sell timeshare. And I was like, well, what do you need to do to sell timeshare? They're like, well, you need a real estate license. I was like, okay. So I went and got my real estate license, and I was like, I didn't want to bartend forever. I knew I didn't want to do it. It's just, I'd seen too many people who were, going into their late 40s and still bartending. I was like, that's not the life I want. So I got my real estate license and got a job selling timeshare, and that's where I sort of was able to take what I learned as a bartender, being able to talk to people, and learned how to do sales. And I don't know if you know much about timeshare sales, but I call them, they're like the Marines of sales. Like, it's one of the most difficult sales you can do, but they do it. And so that's where I learned. That's where I learned about selling, and from there I moved on after about 8 months into real estate. That's where I kind of got into the real estate investment space.
That's incredible. Yeah, I think we have a lot of actually interesting similarities from our earlier lives too. I was very, very shy. I hated math, hated social interaction, but I'm still an introverted person, which a lot of people tell me I'm not, which as an introvert drives me insane. But the funny thing, like I did a lot of food services, right out of college too. I went to school for theater and English. So clearly a degree where I was just like, I could separate myself from who I actually was and put on some performance. And then I ended up in finance. So very interesting trajectory, but I did have some experience in working in restaurants, working in service jobs and things like that. And I do think it really helped, in addition to having the theater background, but it really helped with being able to kind of talk to people. I started at CamaPlan as the administrative assistant. People were like, we just need someone who can talk to people. And I'm like, well, I don't like it, but I can do it. So that's kind of how I got started too. So I think that it's extremely interesting. And I think it's something that I don't know if many people consider, or, some people may take for granted, the fact that those little jobs, like those jobs that they did, especially in moments where, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do just yet. Those are some of the most formative times, I feel like, in people's lives. So I think that's extremely interesting. And then it led you to meeting those guys. So then after real estate, how'd you get involved from there to discovering the note side of things, note investing?
Well, when I left timeshare, I went to so my dad's, I guess it was my dad's secretary's son worked at a real estate investment shop, and my mom and dad, I'm very close with them, had just told them, I'm selling timeshare, don't really like it. Not that I hate it, it's good. You made in I guess 8 months, like $85,000, something like that. So the money wasn't bad, especially for somebody in their mid 20s. But he reached out and said, look, my secretary's kid, who I knew them, that he's working at this job that they're doing investment real estate, and there's an opening. So if you want to go apply, I was like, yeah, please. So I got the information. I went, submitted my resume, had an interview. I think that was kind of like the first real interview I ever went on that I really cared about. And I went, and he's like, all right, I got to interview some more people. I'll let you know. And I remember I just called him every day for probably about 7 or 8 days. I said, hey, how's it going? How's the thing coming? And finally he's like, I'm not done, but you have the job. We're going to hire another person too. I've never had somebody call me repetitively. He's like, you've got something that we'll need, so come on in. So I went in and started working for this company, and it's really where I cut my teeth on the real estate investment side. It was a nationwide wholesale firm. They had offices in 13 or 14 states. They originated hard money for investors. They sourced inventory. And so I did that from 2005, late 2005 through the beginning of 2008. And at that time, the market kind of started getting really shaky. And really the hard money dried up for my investors. So I was left with like, look, I need cash investors to buy houses. Well, real estate was on the decline, and it was not on the decline, but you could feel it very unstable. And so at that point, myself and 3 other guys, we went and started a company to do investment real estate. We're like, look, we don't need this company. They're not providing us the hard money anymore. And so we left. I remember that we all walked out on the same day after we got our butts chewed in a meeting for not producing. And it was just like, all right, we're leaving. And we went and started our own company. And we were really fortunate that we knew how to buy houses and do it at a discounted thing. So from 2008 until the end of 11, I think we did around 400 homes that we flipped. So we were pretty lucky. But in 2011, at the end of it, that's when the market, I would say, was probably at its lowest. But Blackstone and the bigger hedge funds were coming in, buying up inventory, and they were paying 105% of value at the auction. And that kind of squeezed us out. And so my partner and I were like, well, we're going to sell off, go do our own thing, small fix and flips, really have a lifestyle business is what we were looking for. Something that we could, raise our kids, play some golf and hang out. And we stumbled into mortgage notes 3 months later, and that changed everything.
Yeah, I bet. It sounds like, and I think it's extremely interesting too, that when people share that decision of, I chose to leave this job, or I was employed, I had a boss to report to, I had all of these different things. I chose with 3 other guys to go and create my own business. What parts of the learning curve with that were shocking to you or difficult for you or things like that? And how do you get through that? I mean, it's a huge decision. How do you focus your mind to be like, okay, this is something I can do? The fear of failure, I'm going to push that down, this and that. Because I think of myself all the time and think of, one of the main reasons I got out of theater was it was a lot of self-starting and having to basically like pay for myself to be performing and things like that, and kind of running my own business that was just me as a person. So that was one of the big things. Fear of failure really just kind of held me back from a lot of things. So I'm wondering, how did you get through that? How did you and the guys get through that, especially during that time period?
It was, I was blessed with a little bit of I didn't know what I didn't know. There was definitely not knowing how difficult it could be or would be was definitely a benefit. And I didn't have any children at the time. So, and I was still fairly young. I wasn't old by any means. I was probably 28, 27, 26, somewhere in there. So it was one of those things where I was pretty, risk didn't bother me. And I always knew that what I had learned already, I could make it work. And then God forbid, if something ever happened, like I knew I could always pour a drink. So it was just one of those things where I was like, well, let's just go do it. And my mom always tells me, she's like, you walked into the house one day when I was about 8 years old and you said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm never going to work for somebody. And so I don't remember that, but she said, you've always told us that you were going to have your own thing. So I think it's kind of just something that's, I don't know, it becomes ingrained in people that it's. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's something that people either have or they don't. People are either happy to work for someone or they just don't want to do that. I think I agree with that.
I agree. And not to say that if it's not something that's just you're hardwired to do, you can't learn to do it because, there's definitely people out there who started something way late in life and they're super successful at it. And it's just one of those things where, I don't know. I was fortunate that, like I said, I was young and I was able to take risks because I didn't have a family. And then the second thing is I didn't know what I didn't know. It was just, you don't really know what's going on. It was an adventure. And I was like, I've always kind of been, look, I'll jump out of the airplane and build the parachute on the way down. At least that's how I was when I was younger. And so that's what we did.
That's awesome. I think that's a great, especially if younger listeners or newer investors are listening to this and they are struggling with that leap of faith, or they're struggling with the fact of, should I be more worried about X, Y, Z? Sometimes the answer is just simply, no, you don't need to really worry as much about that. You'll land on your feet. You'll have something like that bartending or the theater degree, something that will help you land on your feet. And I think that it's a really great way to look at it and kind of put a finger up to fear, for lack of a better word.
If you look at like a lot of the great things that have been created, it's like out of necessity,
Yes.
Airbnb it's just a great story. They're like, look, how are we going to make the rent? Like, well, there's a convention in town. Let's get some air mattresses and rent out the air mattresses. And something as small as that is now, I mean, you look at Airbnb and it's just great. So I think even sometimes if you set out to do one thing, the mother of necessity will generate something else.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that story with us, and thanks for sharing that candid response. I think that that's going to be helpful for a lot of people. I know myself, I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Screw failure. But thank you. Yeah. So let's talk about PaperStack and MWM Fund. What do both of those? What do both of those do? How has co-founding these companies differed from each other? How have they been the same? Managing them, sure. And then who's a typical client of each of them? What are they getting? What are the benefits they can expect?
Yeah. So PaperStack it's an online platform for people that it's got a marketplace attached to it, but it's really an automated workflow that allows people to buy and sell notes. When we got started in 2012 buying loans, it was kind of the Wild West. You're expected to, as a buyer, we were dealing with a hedge fund, and it's kind of by accident. But we bought our first note it was $90,000 in debt. We paid $8,400 for it for a frame duplex, and it was to buy the note. Like, I had to send money to somebody that I'd never met before they were actually going to give me the paperwork. And I felt kind of comfortable because the guy who brought me the deal was a real estate agent who had worked with this hedge fund before as an REO agent. And he was like, look, they're actually legit. So I did. I sent them money, but it was scary. And I go, there's no way this will work out. And there's no way that this is something that can continue to grow. And so we set out to to really change the market and make it to where, look, there's a place for us to sell our assets, our mortgage notes, but something also to make it to where anybody can do it, whether they're a first-time investor or a second-time investor. And we'd been investing with friends and family money, up into that point. And so in addition to sort of democratizing how people can invest or the method to actually buy and sell loans and a way to source inventory, we wanted to make a fund that was available for anybody to invest in. And so that's where MWM Fund came out, and we went through the SEC. They qualified our fund. It's a Regulation A+ fund, a Tier 2, which basically means that we can take money from anybody, whether they're accredited, whether they're non-accredited, and our buy-in is super low. It's $200.
Nice,
you can do it once, monthly, quarterly, biannually. You can really choose. You can take dividends or you can roll dividends. So they kind of work hand in hand because MWM Fund buys and sells off of the platform, and PaperStack makes it to where it's super transparent and easy to do. Our typical clients for both, there's a little bit of an overlap. We have self-directed retirement fund investors, so people who are, by the sponsor CamaPlan, they are, people would use those, their retirement funds, self-directed IRA, 401ks to go ahead, and they're buying performing loans, mostly stuff that's passive income that they can set it, forget it, collect interest, sit back, and just watch the account grow.
That's really interesting. I think, especially as someone who we've interviewed a lot of people, and it kind of runs the gamut of, our investors are accredited investors, or our investors are anybody. I think it's always very interesting too, especially to hear, for people who are trying to start out, well, what are my options here? What does this look like if I only have $200 in my bank account? Where can I put that? So I think that's great. I'm interested too, we are a self-directed IRA custodian as well, as you mentioned. And does anything differ in terms of, when people are investing in these funds or investing in notes with self-directed IRAs, is there anything that you guys have to do on your end managing clients like that's any different from someone who's just investing money personally?
Oh, well, I mean, if you guys are if you're custodians, the paperwork side is, I mean, that's really the biggest thing is the paperwork side.
Gotcha.
Just getting all the proper paperwork in line for the self-directed retirement account, folks, that's usually the biggest challenge, because everything else, it's still wire transfers and managing the money, and our fund MWM fund stands for money with meaning. We manage with a double bottom line. So we manage for profit and for purpose. So our goal is to help people stay in their house. If we can buy distressed assets and help them stay in their house, that's what we want to do. Of course, it's got to make financial sense, but we go for a purpose first mentality, and not just let's throw people out and take the house back. But it's nice also with the fund is if you're going to buy mortgage notes, that you can be invested in multiple notes and spread your risk, versus if you're buying just one note, if that note doesn't perform, your asset's not performing, your money's not working for you. So it's been good. We've seen a lot of people coming in and doing a tactic I call yield stacking. So for instance, they might buy a rental property, or they may have a mortgage note and they're collecting rent on it, right? And that rent just goes back into their self-directed IRA, and it kind of sits there until they build it up again and they redeploy it. I think that's like dead money. And it's nice that you can take that and put that into a fund that doesn't have a lock period or something like that, earn up to 10% and start earning interest on the compounding interest thing. So that old eighth wonder of the world.
It truly is the eighth wonder of the world. I don't think I knew very much about it until I started working here in finance. And I wish more people from backgrounds like mine did know about it. So I think that it's great that PaperStack and MWM are able to kind of open the playing field to just about anyone. So you've obviously run into a bunch of different people from a bunch of different financial backgrounds and financial literacies as well. So what are some of in terms of characteristics in people that you've met, encountered, your clients, partners, people you've even worked with? What are some of the similarities you've found in people that find success in this industry versus, what are some of the things that set people back?
Detail-oriented people, the devil's in the details. So whether that's a partner who's able to see all the little small details and pay attention to the minutia is something that's important, or it's an investor who, does their due diligence and takes time to not just learn about, a specific asset, but learn about the business in general to have that. I think that's a huge thing. Ego, some lack of ego is a big one also. I definitely like that in an investor, because it usually means they're a little bit more level-headed.
Yes.
And also in a partner, when there's egos involved, things get emotional, and being emotional about investments it's a bad thing. At the end of the day, it's dollars and cents, and sometimes, look, I don't care who you are, you're going to lose on an investment, and knowing when to cut your losses and get out. If somebody's got an ego involved, or they're not level-headed, or they get emotionally tied in, it makes it a lot more difficult to manage an investment properly. So it also, when there's egos involved and they're emotional, it makes it a lot more difficult to be partners with somebody. So those are things that I've seen that make great investors and great partners.
Yeah, definitely. And for you, what do you think are some of your major characteristics for yourself that you think have made yourself a complementary partner, co-founder, team member, that have worked with other people like that? I'm an emotional person. So for me, I would need someone who's very dollar cents, who can sit me down and be like, take yourself out of it. It's money. Like you said, it's not healthy to put your emotion into something like this. So for you, what do you think, is something that's helped you along the way with finding others to work with?
One, being willing to accept it. Like, look, you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room all the time.
Yeah.
You have to be able to surround yourself with smart people. I also am a firm believer in breaking up an echo chamber. echo chambers are dangerous because they can give you the false sense of you're righteously right, going in the wrong, you know what I mean? And
yes, yeah, I do.
So I think that's one of the things. Some of the things I've learned that I didn't have inherently in me is, my partner TJ taught me this. He was like, look, you got to take off the Superman cape. You can't do everything. You have to be able to allow others to do it and trust. And so to me, I've always been a pretty hard worker and willing to look, I'll get it done and I'll try to do everything. And you just can't do that, especially if you're going to grow a company and scale. You have to surround yourself with smart people, trust them that they know what they're doing, and be able to plug yourself in where needed. Because, we're paper stacks a startup, at the end of the day, we've been around for 5 or 6 years, but we're still considered a startup. And so, we've got a fairly small team to where sometimes you got to wear different hats. Yeah. You got to do multiple things. So being willing to, not have an ego and go do the things that need to be done is kind of important.
Absolutely. I love what you said about you can't be someone, TJ told you have to take the Superman cape off, especially because I think a lot of people when starting out probably think, oh, I have to. I think self-directed IRA too can be kind of, obviously people have to self-direct their investments, but it can be almost misleading in that you have to do everything yourself. You can't ask for help. You can't ask questions. You can't learn more a little bit every day about how you can make this investment better, or how you can make the next investment better. So I think, I definitely, I like that a lot. It resonates with me as someone who is very much if I can't get it done, I can just do it myself. It doesn't matter.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I think it would definitely make me a difficult partner. So it's something now hearing from you, if I were to partner with someone, I'm like, okay, well, now I know that I need to cool off, A, and B, just understand that, sometimes someone else is just as capable of doing something as I am. It's kind of like my own ego and then lack of ego battle that I have too, because I'm I don't know what I'm doing, but then sometimes I'm I'll just do it myself. Just forget it. I got it. So.
Yeah, and I think it's also being able to say, hey, can you help me with this? Or I need help. Being able to ask for help is a big part of that. It's not just taking off the cape, but it's look, hey, this is what I need. And definitely, being able to, I would say delegate, but to say, look, this is what I need you to do, because, 2 hands are better than 1 hand and 4 hands are better than 2. And the more you can get done, it's really around coming together as a team and unifying. So, it sounds cliche, but that's, cliches are cliche for a reason, because they make sense.
Exactly. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I think that's where my struggle lies, in the fact that it's not so much because I'm a collaborator. I love working with other people more than I love doing anything myself, but it's more the lack of being able to ask for help and being able to kind of vocalize, hey, I don't get it. Can you help me? Because I don't want to bother someone, or I don't want to do this and that. So it's kind of letting go of a lot of things to be able to find success. So I love your response to that. Thank you for sharing all of that. For you, Rick, your company, you said it's a startup. You've been around for 5-6 years. What is something that has surprised you in terms of where you guys started out, your original goals with everything? 6 years later, is there anything that's changed, or have you guys reoriented your goals at all? Did leading with purpose, was that always part of the plan, or is it something that evolved as you guys got more into it and learned more?
So for Money with Meaning Fund, definitely purpose was not what we started out with. We started out with this mentality of, I came from the real estate investment side, so we're look, we're going to go and buy, it was a cheaper way to get houses. The first note we did, bought it for $8,400, sold it for $38,000, and did it in 14 days, and didn't put a penny into fixing the house up. So we're wow, that was great. They signed the house over to us. Let's do that again. So that's what we did. And once we got a little education and started approaching it with a different mindset of hey, let's try to call up these borrowers and work with them and see if they want to do a short payoff, or if they want to keep the house and we can modify their loan. Somebody cried on the phone with us when we offered them to keep the house and do a short payoff, and it still worked out great for us. We made some money, but it also was more than just the financial reward. There was like, wow, that felt really good.
Yeah.
Let's kind of refocus and reevaluate and back out and come back in and say, look, how can we apply this same mentality of not taking the house but trying to keep them in there? And that's sort of where the purpose part was born. And it changed our investment thesis, and changed how we look at and analyze investments. So that's a huge piece that's changed, and I'm really happy for that on the Money with Meaning side. On PaperStack, man, you kind of set out on this journey of like, we're going to build and change the industry, and we want to make this marketplace and cater to the retail space and make this easy. And when you get into it and you start doing it, and you have these institutional guys come in looking at your platform saying, wow, this is great. We don't have anything like this for the people that are buying and selling $100 million tapes. Could you make something like that? And to see, like, we're in a funding round right now. We're raising capital to, for people to invest in PaperStack to go build that next institutional layer. And just to see, you get in there and think that you've got this grand goal, and then, 5 years later or 3 years later, you look at it and say, no, that's where we need to go. And then even how the platform can go from where it is now to where it can be, and how it's not just applicable to mortgage notes, but we've got title companies asking if we can build something that they can use, and look at the use cases for it. It's really crazy, and it's humbling to say, wow, you can really change how people do business. And so that's great, and having our team has been huge. We've got 4 founders, and 3 of us are just actively pounding away at PaperStack, and TJ, our 4th founder, is actively in MWM Fund managing that fund. So very fortunate to have the team that we have, because we complement each other very well.
That's awesome. And it's awesome to hear, from you sitting at this standpoint, you are clearly able to execute a lot of the goals you started out with, but there are more goals, and you guys obviously want to grow and learn more. And I think having that mindset, especially as a business owner, as a fund manager, as a partner, is huge. Because if everybody's on the same page, we want to grow, and we're here now, but this is where we can be 6 more years from now, is I think really incredible. So I think that's really great, and I'm excited for listeners to hear that and let it strike a chord with them as well. So PaperStack, if I'm understanding correctly, and totally feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned that it's largely online, virtual. That's all note investing that's done virtually. Is that something that has, obviously this year a lot of things have had to go virtual, or this past year. Is that something that was always the goal with that, or is there a little bit more, was there ever a design for, okay, well, we want to do certain things with this hands-on, or was that the original intention? And how have you continued? Because I know in your bio, it's one of your goals was to kind of continue to creatively find new ways for note investing to happen. It's what new discoveries have come out of that, and taking everything and putting it on this crazy thing that we call the internet. It was always, the goal was always to be digital, right? We're a digital world. And like you said, even this past year has really taken any and all aspirations of how digital you're going to be, and kind of thrown it into the microwave and nuked it. And it's like, look, we're speeding this up. You now have but we were fortunate that we were digital before the pandemic, well before the pandemic. Yeah, definitely.
We built the platform as to be the first 100% method to buy and sell notes digitally, meaning you can do it all from your desk, from your phone, really. So that's what we started out to do. But what's crazy is just how far it goes, and you start hearing things about like blockchain and e-notes, and then really, like, it's crazy to think that people are buying and selling $100 million worth of mortgage notes via spreadsheet and email.
Right. Yeah.
And so you realize like that's what we need to tackle. That's what we really need to fix. And that's kind of where we're going. And you look at the different ways that people were buying notes, and traditionally it's just been email and spreadsheets. And so now it's making it to where you can find stuff on our platform. You can close it on our platform. But you don't have to just do that. If you already have the note, like we had somebody reach out to us over the summer and they say, look, I've got 30 notes that I need to close. I'm the seller. I've already got the buyer. I don't need your marketplace. I just need your workflow, because we've made it a workflow engine to where it's like, look, you can close those notes. And we're so excited that that's coming out in the next month or two, to where people can order up closings on our platform, or they can do them in a white label, so something called noteclosings.com that we own. They allow people just to order up a note closing, so you don't have to buy the asset on PaperStack. You can just do it. And so I think that's the great way, is we're adding structure to something that had no structure. If you go ask somebody, where do you go buy if you're going to close a real estate deal, where do you go? Well, I go to an attorney's office, or I go to a title company. You ask that same question to somebody investing in notes, and they're like, there's nothing really structured about it. So we're providing that sort of framework and structure that will ultimately, it's going to be great, because I think it'll help grow the industry.
I agree. I mean, I was listening to your response on this and just thinking, wow, if I were to start investing in anything in real estate, I would probably start to look at notes, but I have no idea where to start with that. Like, where do I go? And then you just answered that question. I think that it's great that you're able to kind of create this operational structure now to something that didn't have a structure. So that's incredible. I'm excited to see what you guys can cook up next in that crazy old microwave. So for you, then how do you, in terms of, you're one of the creative minds behind how these new operational things need to be stood up in order to grow the business, to grow people's capabilities on PaperStack, this and that. How do you discover, what's your process then for unlocking creative ways that people can continue to purchase and sell mortgage notes? Do you have a process now that's sort of developed out of all of this, or is it more of a just kind of learn as I go kind of thing, which is fine too? It's more. No,
it's definitely process oriented. I think I'm very good at saying, wow, I wish it could do this, or could you imagine if it did that? And it's a lot of a think tank session. Our developer and one of my co-founders, Mike McClin, he is the engineer. You know what I mean? He is the one that knows how the levers work. He's put in every piece of code on the platform. So it really usually stems from, hey, what do you think about this idea? And then we will sit there and have a roundtable meeting. I guess some of our best stuff has come from whenever we would go to conferences, right? It's great. Conferences were such a huge benefit for PaperStack, because you're able to go and at the same conference talk to the small individual investor, the people who are the grunts they're buying for their own self-directed IRAs or 401ks, but you can also talk to the institutions.
Right.
And it was nice because we would normally fly out to Texas, Dallas, Houston, or we'd be in California. And so we would go for 8 hours a day and sit at these events. And then we would always get an Airbnb, and we'd all go back, all 4 partners would go back to the Airbnb, and we would take these ideas and we would cook dinner. We're all really good cooks, so we would buy places that had grills, and we would cook, steaks, and just hang out. And we would start bouncing these ideas, and you would have something that would start at, the start of cooking, and we're still working on it or talking about it, and it's 12 o'clock at night, and we're like, oh man, we just took in and we had this great think tank session based off of the stuff we're getting from interaction. And so definitely that was a huge part of our process. That was great.
It sounds like a scene out of an Aaron Sorkin movie or something.
Yeah, exactly. And it works. And I think us having this free-flowing dialogue whether it's at a conference or whether it's at the office. We have a standing Thursday meeting that we're always 3 or 4 hours in. That's a big part of the process. And then once we figure out what we want to do and where we want to go, we make tickets. We use a system on GitHub where we make development tickets, and we break it down, do a schema, everything like that, and then it goes into the backlog. And every 2 weeks we go shopping. We call it shopping for what are we going to put in development. And so you have to just prioritize things. But yeah, there's a lot of process that goes into new development.
That's incredible. I thank you for breaking it down too, because I feel like for someone who I have zero idea what goes into coming up with these operational systems like this. Where do you get the inspiration, and then how do you execute it? So I think that your sharing of that is really incredible. So thank you. For then you guys also, how do you mentioned the idea of investors who can conduct their own due diligence on investments is a huge success tactic as well. How do you guys then have to vet some of your investments? What are some of the things that you consider when you're looking, and that people should consider if they're looking to make a first investment, especially in the notes sector?
If you're doing the notes sector, there's the biggest thing is value of the asset. Like, what is it worth? Because at the end of the day, you're buying ultimately something that's backed by a piece of real estate. And so we always like to make sure that you have sufficient value there, that you're not overpaying for an asset. The next, and I probably, before you even start doing that, you should understand what's your goal as an investor. Are you looking for long-term passive income? Are you looking to be more hands-on? Are you looking to buy non-performing and try to take the house back or turn it performing? All those things are going to just affect your decision making, right?
Definitely, yeah.
So, that's the biggest thing, I think, is focusing on the value, but then also setting up, before you jump into an asset, know the business a little bit. You should get some education. You should be very laser focused and have your systems set up. So for us, when we're buying assets, we know, look, this is our goal with this asset. Here's our systems. We've already got those in place, our infrastructure, if you will, on how things are going to work. And then it's just buying the asset, plugging it into the machine, and moving on to the next one.
Thank you. And then, so for you, as you mentioned, you have 3 kids at home, 3 young kids, and this past year, a lot of things, even though you've already been doing so much on the digital side of everything, you've probably spent a decent amount of time at home, having to go into the office sometimes, this and that. It's one of the questions I do like to ask everybody is kind of, what is something that you've been able to pick up within the past year or learn, whether it's out of an interesting book that you want to recommend or share, or anything that you watched that you found interesting, if it was a cool YouTube or just something random that you picked up a new tool or a lesson from?
Like I said, I said at the beginning, I kind of get into stuff and just start doing it. Yes. And so podcasting, we have a podcast with Paperstack, and I think that was a big something that we've picked up on, and it was hey, to start with, we had a computer and a microphone, and we would record a Zoom meeting, and from there it just, it started. We record video as well, so we're able to put it out as a podcast and put it out as on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel that we put it out on, and it's kind of it's fun, but it's also a way to give back. When I got into buying notes and we went and got education, I paid my partner and I, TJ, we split and paid. It was $26,000 to have a mentor, and I don't regret it at all. I made, we were down at a seminar, a 3-day thing. We signed up, and what we learned in those 3 days and started turning around driving from Fort Lauderdale back to Orlando, we applied and made back $8,000 or $9,000. So, I'm talking within an hour of leaving. So it's one of those things where you pay for it, but I've always been of the mentality of look, I don't want to necessarily be an educator and go out and have people pay me to teach them. I want to just give back. So we go in our podcast, we talk a lot and I just share my knowledge,
right,
and say, I want to give back that way and say, look, here's the knowledge I have. I'll answer. We answer people's questions through our podcast, stuff like that. So the picking up of the podcasting over the last year was it helped with COVID and just
getting to interact with people. We did the same with ours too.
Right.
But it's nice.
Also as just an outlet to share our stories and share our information. So, and then as a company, we put out, the paper stack market report, which gives people insights to the market, which, people don't really know. They're like, thank you for doing this. So those are some of the things that have been this past year have been great.
Yeah. And they, like you said, they're really incredible ways to give back without, and, it's up to what people prefer to do. Like you said, if people really want to pay for the mentor and work one-on-one with them, that's great. But for people who have been home for the past year, if they're trying to get new information, podcasting is such a great way to kind of pick up some new information while you're doing some other work or while you're putting away laundry or this and that. It's something you can carry around information in your pocket. And I think that it's an incredible tool, for sure.
And as a host, you probably understand this, and I've learned this, is like, I learn so much when I have somebody on the platform. And you get to sit and talk with them. You're like, oh my gosh, you pick up so much stuff. You're like, I never would have known about this, or I never even thought about that angle, or I never would thought to ask this question. And you have people on talking, and I love it. It's been great.
Absolutely. Well, I think as a fellow host, you definitely have been a really illuminating guest as well in that way, because we're definitely able to have a really meaty conversation. I feel like we're basically making a steak as we've talked about this. So I really do appreciate you being so candid and open and informational in this approach, because I definitely have learned so much from this conversation today. It's literally not me tooting your horn because you just said that, but it's very true. I have definitely learned so much more about the note sector and what it's now capable of doing, and what PaperStack has allowed people to be able to start doing with this sector. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share all that with us. Thanks, I appreciate it. It's I set you up, so you had to say it. No, I promise. It was coming, regardless of if you did say it. So one question we do ask everyone as well is, because the responses are always so interesting, especially, from people who, like you, have informational podcasts or things like that they're getting, they're sharing information with folks. What would you say are your keys to building wealth and unlocking your financial freedom? So these don't have to be financial keys necessarily, but what has informed the way that you, Rick Allen, have informed your unique definition of success? One, it is learn knowledge. You just have to learn and be knowledgeable. The second is take action. A lot of times people, they get so caught up in, paralysis by analysis. They start looking and they never pull the trigger. And you got to understand that you have to pull the trigger at some point. And it's not a sprint. It's a race. But you have to take the initiative, and you have to say, okay, I'm going to do this. And once you change your mindset and set your goal, you'll find that that goal, if that becomes your goal, it'll filter down to the rest of your life, as far as not just your investing, but you'll think about that, and the decisions you start making will help get you to that goal. So set your goal and then go attain it. It's awesome. There's not really a secret. It's funny, my daughter, she plays travel softball, and on the back of her jersey, or her practice jersey, it's hard work equals success. And it's funny. We just had practice yesterday, and there's, we always tell the girls, like, look, there's no secret ingredient. It's just hard work. If you put in the work, it'll happen, and it might not happen right away. Right. It's like everybody's definition of hard work is different, but if someone is putting in a different kind of hard work than someone else, that's not to say that they're less successful. So I agree with that completely. Yeah. So that's, that would be it. And, I guess surround yourself with the kind of people that you want to become. You know what I mean? They say if
you surround yourself with 4 people that are real wealthy and have great mindsets, you're going to become the 5th. If you surround yourself with 4 negative people that have bad mindsets and they're not really responsible, you're going to become the 5th.
Right.
So surround yourself with those people, reach out to them, connect with them.
Absolutely.
And just change. You hang around with dogs, you get fleas.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's another one of those very apt cliches, I think, for sure,
Good.
But thank you. I think this has been such a creatively inspiring conversation. I definitely think I'll walk away from this and think more about, how can I start to creatively redefine the way that I look at the processes that I'm implementing in my own work right now, or about the way I start to look at the way I'm going to invest my money, or all these different things. So thank you, Rick. I really think that I know I'm going to take a lot away from this conversation, and I am very certain our listeners will as well.
Great. I'm happy. It was a good conversation. I enjoyed it.
Thanks. The one final question we do have before we go is how can people reach you? Where can people listen to you as well? Do you have any websites, social medias that listeners are able to use to get in touch with you?
Sure. So you can search me on LinkedIn. I'm always there. And I can give you my link to that. Our Paper Stack podcast, we're on all the major Apple and and Android and all that stuff, on what else, Spotify. You can what else, you could reach me if you want to email me at rick@paperstack.com. So paperstac.com. No K, that one was taken. Yeah,
I kind of like it without the K, so.
Yeah, it is way cooler, much more modern. So that's the best way to do it. On social media, the website, if you want to check out the website, it's free to sign up. It's free to look and shop for assets. It's a great way to start. If you're thinking about investing in notes, just to go start looking at notes and saying what's available, and kind of getting an idea. And you can use all of our amazing search filters and narrow it down to find exactly what you want and where you want it. So, feel free to reach out if you have questions. I'm happy to help out when I can or answer them and just give back.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rick. We really appreciate you coming on today and taking time to speak with us today.
I appreciate it, Jessica. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone listening, please be on the lookout for more CamaPlan events that feature Rick Allen, Paperstack, and MWN Fund. But until then, I keep wanting to speed through it. MWM Fund. It's MWM. But until then, thank you, everyone, for joining us again this week on the road to financial freedom. Be sure to tune in to hear more from our experts who have paved their roads to financial freedom next week, or call CamaPlan to learn more about how you can start to take control of your future wealth. Thank you, Rick, and thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you all for tuning into our podcast. We truly hope that you're enjoying your ride along the road to financial freedom so far. If you like what you've heard and learned, or if you want to hear more about certain topics that we may have already covered or have yet to cover, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. We would love to hear any feedback from you so that we may continue to make our podcast the best that it can be for you, our listeners. Thanks again, everyone, and remember, tune in next week to the road to financial freedom.